I would like to point out one more thing regarding the position of the parallel table mechanism, is that in my understanding it shouldn't be 100% parallel with the saw blade, because when you cut the material, then the first blade teeth are making the cut itself. But what you don't want is when the material reaches to the back teeth, that these will either lift the material up, although against that you will have the riving knife, but you don't want to have those cosmetical back teeth marks on the material. Therefore, the blade and the cut material should be a little bit away from one another in the back part of the saw blade. As the saw blade itself is already set related to the cast iron table in the factory, and I don't want to change this location. This means that my only option was to install the slider a little bit under the angle like that. And what I tried to achieve is that I tried to achieve a gap related to the front of the blade teeth to the back teeth, like 0.05 millimeters. I didn't achieve that exactly. I got it like 0.07, but for the time being it was good enough for me. But later on I think that I discovered a little extra problem with that. The problem is that I do want to have the slider mechanism and the parallel fence being perfectly parallel to one another, which would mean that I should adjust the parallel fence also under the same angle, little bit to the same direction as the slider goes. But that would mean that the gap between the front part of the blade and the parallel guide is larger than the back end and parallel guide, which means that all the material that you slide in from this side of the table would be pinched, and this is dangerous and creates some kickback and things like that. So this is something that you can't regulate separately, that this does one thing and this side does another thing, because the blade itself is a parallel to itself. So for me it means that I probably will remove this little gap there totally and try to make everything totally parallel to one another, which means that I need to readjust the sliding mechanism, which also means that I need to readjust the I'm not sure what the correct name for that mechanism is, but let's say that it's the wing of the slider. I need to adjust that one as well, because that one gets its base point from the slider. I have a separate video which shows the original calibration of this wing mechanism. There was so big height difference in here that it was totally off, because those those adjustment mechanisms were totally loose, and it couldn't provide any even surface. Last time I showed you that I only had one scale in here. Now factory has sent me another one which I haven't yet installed in here, but as you can see, one scale runs from 0 to 45 and the other one goes reverse. They tried to explain it in a way that newer models don't have the second scale anymore, but they haven't told anyone. So maybe it is like that, maybe it's not, but they still promote their machines as having 2 scales. So I don't know. After I adjusted this sliding mechanism and tried to calibrate the parallel, not parallel, but crosscut fence as well. Not crosscut. Yeah, crosscut. I think it's crosscut. Crosscut rip fence, parallel fence, crosscut fence. So many technologies. Okay. Maybe I'm messing up those terms a little bit, but you can get the idea. I tried to make all this mechanism so I could produce perfect square or 90-degree cuts for plywood to make those cabinets and drawer boxes and etc. And it was quite difficult to get the get it set up so it would keep the 90-degree angle, because the calibration shifted off all the time, and I didn't understand in the beginning how can it be, because for some cuts I could achieve perfect 90-degree cuts, and for the others they were like 1 millimeter less per 1 meter than with the other plywood parts that I cut. And I didn't understand what's going on because I didn't have any how to say material between the plate that I'm cutting between the material and the fence, so there wasn't any debris in here, or everything seems to be good, but still the fact was that those panels that I cut were not as I wanted. And then I discovered 2 cool features of this sliding mechanism. One is that which I discovered before, is that this wing is getting the support of this arm in here. But as I already readjusted the cast iron top slider mechanism, which already copied the or gave the new base point for the wing mechanism, it meant that maybe it was a little bit already different, all those planes than they were during the factory setup, which meant that this joint in here, this connection, was also not parallel or perpendicular to the plane of the cast iron table and the slider mechanism, which meant that as the sliding mechanism moved, this joint didn't give a perpendicular contact, which meant that if I pulled the mechanism fully to the other side, it was either lifted by this arm or lowered, depending on which end I drove that. I don't know if we can see it at the moment, but there will be at the moment it is supporting this wing, and when I move around with that, it should lift off. Okay, maybe not anymore because I already adjusted it a little bit. There are 4 adjustment screws in here, out of which one was totally loose. It was about to fall out, and therefore it didn't give any support to the wing mechanism. So each time I moved with the slider, the arm gave uneven support, sometimes lifted the wing, sometimes lowered the wing, which meant that the wing was not on the same plane anymore as the slider mechanism. Okay, I will install the guide as well and show you some additional problems.